everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. This is your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hello, hello, hello. It's Diana.
And it's Jackie.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Hey.
We are here to discuss Supervision again, because it's still Supervision September. That's right. Supervision September, Part 2, Barriers to Supervision. Ooh. So, here at ABA Inside Track, every week we talk about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, and like we already said, this month is all about research related to supervision practices. Now, it's very important, if you are a BCBA interested in supervising, that you continue to learn more about the act of supervision, because it is a relatively new skill for, I think, many of us. And last week we had an episode all about technology and the changes to the supervision that are coming down the pike in very few short months. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about the act of supervision, namely some things you should remember about supervision to avoid falling into some pitfalls and barriers related to supervision. And then we'll talk about what do you do when you realize you didn't do any of those, you didn't take any of those pre-actions. And now you're stuck in a giant pitfall of supervision. And the answer is not tell your supervisee to find a new supervisor.
You gotta watch out for those, like, ribbons of fire that circle around, come up to get you. Right? You gotta watch out for the spike pits.
Yep.
You gotta watch out for that angry sun.
Oh,
he will get you every time.
That's a lot of gamers. What about the angry mask? When you pick up the key and the angry mask Phanto, he comes at you. It's Super Mario Brothers 2.
I don't really remember Phanto.
Did you play Super Mario Brothers?
Yeah, 1.
You never played anything other than Super Mario Brothers 1?
Just 1, level 1, world 1.
That's the only
awesome.
Mario you ever played.
I got to world 8 once with all the skipping of the hidden like pipes.
You did
and
the
stuff.
warps?
Yeah, warped. But no, I like to stay where I'm comfortable in 1. Level 1.
Well, luckily
World
for
1.
our
I played
listeners,
Mario 3 the most.
Mario World is the best Mario.
Is that with Yoshi?
Yes, it's the first one on the Super Nintendo.
No, because it started using the joystick style.
No, that's Mario 64.
Yeah, I was out.
Mario 64 is
out.
is awesome.
Mario World, we had the whole book of cheats.
Yep, I had that too.
But anyway,
much
we
like
digress.
I know we usually say it's not going to be a Super Mario tip podcast, but you know what? We're going to be talking about supervision tips to warp you ahead in your supervision.
Supervision, Super Mario. It's pretty close.
We're going to show you the trick to get 99 supervision lives. But don't get 100 lives because you will die and you will lose all those extra lives. Anyway, that's all we got in terms of tips. Play Super Mario Brothers with your supervisee or trainee. We're going to use trainee from now on.
Trainee is the new term.
Trainee's the new term.
Trainee. So if you play Super Mario Brothers with your trainee, they'll be like, you're an old person. Nobody plays these old games anymore.
That's fine.
We're going to be talking about 2 specific articles written by Sellers, Valentino, and LeBlanc. The order of the names is changed to protect them. I don't know. So we've got the first one, Recommended Practices for Individual Supervision of Aspiring Behavior Analysts by Sellers, Valentino, LeBlanc. That was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2016. Then we'll be talking about Recommendations for Detecting and Addressing Barriers to Successful Supervision by Sellers, LeBlanc, Valentino. And that's also in BAP from 2016. It's almost like they put them in the same issue because they were related articles.
It was the Supervision Special Edition. So if you want to get more info on supervision, you can always go to the Special Supervision Edition. That's kind of
That's good. That was pretty...
Supervision Edition in Behavior Analysis 2016.
Yes, and before we get into the recommended practices for individual supervision of aspiring behavior analysts, while it is a nice article, I think the biggest strength of it is, and if you'd like, go to the following tables in our article where we list all the steps and tons of other resources.
Yes, they give you so many data sheets.
They stole our shtick of just taking other people's information and then sharing it with other people. That's our thing.
Yeah, I love
It's also a numbered list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I love. I love a good numbered list.
I love a good number list too, and another thing that I love is that the table, you can open it in a separate window, and it gives you other areas to look at in terms of resources. Mm-hmm. So that made me so happy because I love that. Mm. So if I'm like looking at poor interpersonal skills, I can see all the different ways that I can assess and treat poor interpersonal skills based on scientific research.
Yes, and I think between the two articles, this the recommended practices was my favorite because it did what I love, which is, hey, do you want me to just spell out exactly what to do? Here you go. Whereas the second one had a lot more room for, it could be kind of this. It's almost like having a discussion with someone where the topic changes a little bit as you're going through the paragraph.
Yeah.
And you're not sure if you're over complicating it by trying to like put it together in like a coherent list. At least that's what I found. So they're all very interesting information.
Wow, way to really just like lay your cards out there, Rob.
I want a list. All right, there's a reason that I'm not Dr. Perry Cruz. It's because I'm a bit dumb and I like a list of activities.
No, I mean, you already told us which one's your favorite. We haven't even talked about them yet.
I mean, I already read them. It's not... The listeners come because they want us to read the article to them on the air. I've read this, guys. Hold on a sec.
Well, anyway.
We're getting punchy because it's Supervision September, I tells you.
Supervision September.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Who wants to start off with kind of the initial kind of summary of recommended practices?
I do. I really do.
Go for it, Jaggy.
So we all know that we need to train our new staff, right? So as supervisors, we have trainees or new staff that we want to make the best possible new staff ever, right? So that's going to help them, that's going to help us, that's going to help the field. Based on so much literature that's been done in the past, we still know that behavioral skills training is the gold standard when we're training new staff. So remember, behavioral skills training, or BST, is it's a treatment package, and it's comprised of instructions, modeling, role play, and feedback. So theoretically, according to our ethical guidelines, every skill that we train, we should be using BST in some capacity or another. And right now, as we all know, there's a huge rise in individuals seeking training and seeking increased credentialing, but there's not called credentialing, increased credentials through the BACB. And this could be due to a lot of things. So the article maybe says that's possible because now it's mandated by insurance. So insurance mandates that you have RBTs, BCABAs, BCBAs. We're everywhere now, so you can see the results.
Behavioral analysts are in more demand.
Right. We're more credible now, I think, too, because you can see a lot of you can see like specific results across a wide variety. So it's not just kids with autism. It's not just kids or adults in like a psychiatric hospital, right? When it was first coming about, we now have things in place such as the BACB. We have an ethics code similar to other science professions, where we're not just, they've got a toolbox of things and now they're doing it.
Yeah, it's real science.
It's real science.
Well, it's always been real science, guys.
It has.
It's more legit. I think there's more legitimacy.
There's more oversight.
Yeah.
I mean, and there should be, and that's an appropriate thing.
I always miss the Wild West. The Wild West days of behavior analysis.
Yeah, so in 2016, oversight became a little more stringent, which is necessary. Did have to happen. And so now supervisors are required to obtain a certain level of supervision training in order to be a supervisor, whereas before that did not happen, right? So supervisors are now required to take an 8-hour supervision class that follows the BACB supervision outline, although the BACB does not endorse any one specific training.
Right.
And so once you do that, you also then still need to keep learning about supervision every cycle that you have by maintaining your supervision certification with 3 continuing education units. So
every 2 years.
Every 2 years. So every cycle that
cycle.
you have. Yeah. So that's pretty awesome because now we're forced to keep learning about supervision, right? So we might not necessarily...
I love forced learning.
Yeah, we might not necessarily have gone to a supervision talk when there's like a really cool like animal talk or Pat Fryman talk. Everybody loves to go see Pat Fryman.
I went to one that was really cool called Under the Dome.
Ooh.
And everyone there thought it was going to be about sports, like behavior analysis in sports. And it was about statistics, like under the bell curve dome. It was still fascinating, but just not,
But not about sports.
It was a packed house,
Right.
And I feel like, kind of to your point, Jackie, I feel like in sort of this second phase of what supervision and what good supervision is. And I think we're trying to reflect that too in these episodes. Like last year, we did the Supervision Book Club, which again, if you haven't ever heard our show and you're new to supervision, you probably want to go back and actually listen to those 3 episodes.
Right.
Because it was very much, it was very much about the idea of how to teach people to do skills, how to engage in skills. So it was behavior skills training 101 pretty much.
Yeah.
From our read in person supervision book.
Without us coming to your house and being like, now let me see you.
Whereas I think now it's more about kind of the metagame of supervision. So it's not the actual, like, what are you doing as a supervisor so much as what do you need to do to prepare for supervision to occur? And what are the problems that can come up now that you're doing the basics?
Right.
I think a lot more people are in that position because a lot of people took the 8-hour course and they're like, okay, I got to recertify. So what's next? And you move on to more complex skills.
And really, so even if you take that 8-hour supervision class and you still recert and you have a trainee that needs to have supervised hours according to the BACB guidelines, we know what can count, but it's really still up to the supervisor on what counts and what doesn't count as supervised experience and what trainees can do to count for those hours. So even if you are a new supervisor, you still need to know what can count and what can't count. So it's really up to the discretion to the supervisor, right? And John Bailey made a really excellent point, both in this article and in a workshop that I saw him. He's like, think about the supervisor that you had that was really awesome, and then you want to be like them. And if you had a supervisor that wasn't as awesome, take the things that you did not like that they did, and then don't do them, right? And change it around. But we don't really have a lot of resources out there right now that says this is what it means to be a great supervisor, right?
There's more than there used to be.
Yes,
but
there's more.
It's still that. I mean, and even this article will tell you, like, here's some great ideas we think. I don't know. We didn't research some of these. And they're very upfront about these are ideas.
Right.
They are based on what research is out there, but it's not like this is the exhaustive list.
Right.
Of like behavior skills training. We know how to do behavior skills training as a field. Supervision. We have a good idea of lots of positive ways to do supervision, and there are some areas that are well researched, but much of it is sort of, we think this is best practice, but there are no numbers to show. And when people talked this way to their supervisees, you got these results in terms of speed of fluency to the task list. Yeah. That doesn't exist in a lot of areas.
Right. And so this article really wants to take the accumulation of the literature based on supervision and all of the years of experience that these authors have. And if you know them, they've had a lot of experience.
Right.
It was 27 together.
So many years.
Didn't that seem low, though?
It did seem a little bit low. I thought it was going to be much more, but I thought one of them may have had that much. But I guess
maybe it was specifically supervision. Like, well, the first 5-6 years of my career, I wasn't.
We didn't do that because nobody did it, right?
Relatively recent addition.
So they outlined 5 practice guidelines to help us be the best supervisors that we can be. So I'm going to tell you what those 5 are, and then we're going to really delve into them. So I know that Rob and Diana love lists. So here
I love
Diana does
too.
Diana
loves them for aesthetic reasons. I love them because I can't learn without a list.
Well, you know, I actually have all my markers out here right now, you guys.
She really does.
I do. I have 8 different colors of markers, and I just can't wait to make a list of something so I can color code it.
Okay, so coming in at number 1. I wish
these are more in order of how they would go.
Yeah, no, I know.
They're like chronological order.
It just sounded fun to say that because I always wanted to be a DJ.
Coming in at
Top 5 practice guidelines for aspiring supervisors
for 7 weeks in a row.
Number 1, establish an effective supervisor-supervisee relationship.
Or supervisor-trainee relationship.
Trainee relationship.
It's not their fault, though. That's a recent change.
Yeah, that's true.
Technically, you can still call them supervisees until January 1st, at which point you are not allowed to.
Now they'll be trainees. Number 2, establish a structured approach with specific content and competencies in your supervision. Number 3, evaluate the effects of your supervision, which we have to do now because of our ethics guidelines. Number 4, incorporate ethics and professional development into your supervision. And number 5, rounding out the top 5 practice guidelines for aspiring behavior analyst supervisors is continue the relationship post-certification.
Ooh.
Yeah, so there they are.
All right. Well,
I like that. It's soup to nuts. Have you ever ended a meal with nuts?
No.
I always start meals with nuts.
It's an odd phrase I've never understood.
Yeah, I mean, I
think maybe not in America.
No, because nuts usually you get before your meal. Because they're just on the table and you just like peanuts.
How does soup
I think if it's
become
like
nuts?
Or soup and then
No.
nuts and
No.
then your meal.
No, it's soup to nuts. It's beginning to end. That's what
No,
it
I
means.
understand the phrase, but what?
I've never had
When have
nuts.
It's like sometimes you have like cheese. Like it's like dessert and then cheese and then nuts.
Wouldn't it be appetizers to dessert? Wouldn't that be a better phrase?
Only if you are eating at TGI Fridays. Not if you're eating your fancy 13-course meal.
It's jalapeno poppers to tiramisu.
Oh, yeah. So I looked it up on Wikipedia real fast. Soups nuts is an American English idiom that conveys the meaning of from beginning to end. It is derived from the description of a full course dinner in which courses progress from soup to a dessert of nuts.
Ugh.
Wikipedia.
I hope my dessert is never just a dessert
I know,
of
we had
nuts.
ter-
Like candied nuts, maybe?
We had tiramisu for dinner this evening.
For
I mean,
dessert.
for
dessert.
dessert. It was so delicious.
And dinner,
Size,
too.
man.
It was
But
terribly
anyway,
unhealthy.
let's start.
So,
Let's do it.
you want to establish an effective supervisor-trainee relationship. Diana, how do I go about that?
Well, first, Rob, you really need to consider the gravity of the mentor role.
I love that actually because I have seen so many people in this field being like, yeah, I'll be a supervisor to like 30 people. No big.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. I'll get paid extra. That's amazing, right? Like, maybe they get paid extra.
Oh.
Sometimes people do, not always. But then they're like, yeah, I can just do all these. No big. But they don't even think about like, you are shaping the future of behavior analysis.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Like, you want this person to have a problem and say, I know what to do.
Right?
Or I know who to ask or where to
Yeah.
find the answer someday. And so they can send you a nice note saying like, hey, by the way, I came up with this problem and I remembered this thing we did. And what a
Right?
fun memory. And you remember laughing about that research article you were reading together and you get a little tear because, they've grown up so fast. That's what you
Yeah.
want.
But it is so fast. That's the thing.
It is so fast.
Almost all behavior analytic master's programs are 2 to 3
Yeah.
years.
Mhm.
That is not long to go from being a behavior therapist to someone who is
in charge of everything.
Yeah.
BCBA overseeing the education and treatment of problem behavior of children with
Yeah.
special needs and overseeing supervising staff as well and interacting with parents and interacting with school systems. And it's a lot of responsibility.
And given where you're interested in working or applying your behavior analytic trade, there's a good chance that no one will know what your job is supposed to be other than we need a behavior analyst.
Right.
And they don't know, oh, you just got your BCBA, but you trained with someone. They don't know that means you actually don't know how to do your job particularly well yet just because you're inexperienced. But you could still get a pretty good job where you're in charge of tons and tons of clients and staff, and it's the first time you've ever actually engaged. Hopefully not, but the way
Right.
supervision used to be, it might be the first time you've ever engaged in half of these skills.
So I always tell my students that as a supervisor, everything that your trainee does is your fault. So even if you weren't there, your fault. Even if they screw up, your fault. Even if you told them to do the right thing and they did the wrong thing, that's your fault. Right? That's super gravity right there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's like hard hitting. And they're like, but what? I'm like, no, this is your role. Right?
Yeah.
So you got to
Because in 2 years, that's all you get.
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So you're going to take your role very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And one of the ways you can do that is by making this a kind of a contractual relationship. And that's,
Yeah.
that's new in the guidelines that you need to have a contract. You can get that from the BACB website. You can make your own using the components that you need to have. But that is a requirement. You have to have a contract that lays out what is going to be included in the supervision. It's recommended that you talk about like what is the field work that you're supervising going to look like, what
Right.
hours should be used for restricted and unrestricted, not restricted or unrestricted. I always mix that up. Unrestricted. How much can you supervise? Because it's important too, because you want it to be very clear how much time you have to supervise. Because if you have someone who's a young go-getter and they're like, I need 4 hours of supervision a week, before you get in a relationship, you have to realize, like, I don't have that time.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to give this trainee what he or she wants, and maybe you're not the right supervisor. So that's clear. And then also you want to have, what are the expectations? So it's really, really
Right.
clear.
I love that because the authors really say that without those clear guidelines in that contract, the mutual agreement that this is something that we're doing together, and then the mutual respect that none of this is going to work.
Yeah.
So I love that little phrase.
Yeah. And if you're, I mean, they break it up into two different sections, but I think the contract and the setting clear expectations, while not all of those expectations need to be in your contract, you should probably put a lot of them. You know, for example, if you're expecting them to engage in tasks on the task list, like you're going to do an FA, like we'll find an FA that makes sense for you to be a part of. And your trainee is like, I don't really have time for that, or my job's not paying me for that. Then you may want to, talk about what are the pros and cons of their, not wanting to live up to that expectation, because perhaps your expectations are higher than theirs. And then you have to decide, should they be living up to my expectations? Should I not be expecting this? Or is this just not going to be a good relationship to get into?
I like that. And setting that up right in the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah. And then also having, how can we terminate this relationship, which we'll get into more in the next article. But worst case scenario, it could happen.
That information should be in the contract, as should talking about how you're going to give and receive feedback as well. So that could be part of the meeting requirements and how that's going to be handled. And then just overall creating like a positive relationship. So the contract shouldn't be viewed as a punitive thing. It's more like this is the establishment of our relationship as supervisor and trainee.
One thing I love is that they said that if you might have to, when you're accepting feedback, you might have to provide behaviors that you would like to see, such as smiling, nodding, taking notes. I love that. I mean, those are types of things that you really should think about too, right? Be like, this is what's going to happen, and here's how I want you to respond. You may not want to respond that way. And I guess the take-home message here is that we actually want people to be around us, right? As supervisors, we want, when people see us coming, they shouldn't be like, oh crap, it's Jackie, here she comes. Do everything perfectly. Get your hair right, right? You want them to be like, oh, great, Jackie's here. She's going to help me, right? Like we want people to be around us. And I think sometimes that's not necessarily the case when it's a supervisor-trainee relationship. But it should be.
I mean, I think, again, if you listen to last year's Supervision September, when we were going over the Supervisor's Guidebook, the idea that giving being present a lot, giving a lot of more positive feedback than corrective feedback, the same rules would apply for being the supervisor of a team of clinicians as they would be to a supervisor-trainee relationship. The scheduling is going to be different. You may not observe them as much as, say, the people that you're working with on a daily basis, but you want to make sure that you have plenty of opportunities to give that positive feedback, to make sure you give corrective feedback. It's known what that will look like, that you're able to find things to praise them about, so it's clear what the expectations are. Because the last thing you want to have is sort of we're going to do some things on the task list, and then, I kind of hinted you should do some paperwork, and then you didn't do it, and now I'm yelling at you about you didn't do your paperwork. Because that's on you. That's on you as a supervisor. You didn't lay that out very well, and now you're damaging the relationship with your trainee. And you can say, oh, but they should know better. If they want to be in this field, they should do a better job. But,
Not true. I mean, they might not know better.
Yeah.
Right? Unfortunately.
Well, they probably don't know better.
And if they do know better and they're still not doing it, that's for our second article to discuss, right?
Yeah, we'll get more into that.
Assume it's your fault until you think it's not your fault. Right, is sort of the way to start this supervision relationship.
I kind of like that. I've been trying to practice that in my real life as well. Like, if something goes awry and something goes wrong, I'm like, all right, this was probably my fault. Until I've gone through all of the checklist items, I'm like, no, I did that, I did that, I did that, I did that. Okay, this is actually not my fault. But I have been trying to do that in my real life as well, which is funny. That's our first practice guideline, and I think that's really a helpful one to start with.
So, Diana, you want to do number 2, establishing a plan for structured supervision, content, and competence evaluation. I think the step that is, of all of these steps, kind of the hardest to implement.
I agree because if you don't have it all set up already, it's going to be a lot of work in the beginning. Yeah.
So ideally, what would that look like, though?
When you're making a plan like this and we're trying to evaluate our trainees' behavior, then it should really be 2 parts. There should be a performance-based component and a competency-based component, and those can work together, but they should be thought of sort of as individual pieces. And what we're working to do here is really set up a list of objective and measurable competency. And those can be determined at the discretion of the supervisor, but they should include both those performance components and competency components. So a performance component would be, have I observed this objectable behavior and have witnessed my trainee engaging in the behavior I want to see, and I can check it off and say, yes, they can do a preference assessment or whatever it may be. And then a competency-based performance, it may be items that are related to the task list, such as can you describe for me all the varying types of positive and negative reinforcement and punishment? And do you have verbal fluency with those types of terms? Each of those pieces should be, there should be some system for keeping track.
Yeah, so I think that's the hard part, is developing rubrics or checklists on even the performance-based measurements and the competence-based measurement, if you're going to be very objective, right? And if you're going to be like the most objective you can be, you should have a binder with everything that you're doing with a rubric made out for that.
Yeah.
What that specific competency and performance area, which I think over the years we could definitely create one. You know, they take some time.
Well, it feels like the sort of thing that you're almost like, why aren't the grad programs building some of this?
Oh, we have them.
Like maybe as a field, we need to agree, like, let's share more of these documents. We talk more about it when the bonus episode comes out with Dr. Hughes, Lika. She has all these great spreadsheets on Google Drive where it's all the task lists and you can list people's competencies and it documents what time they got the assignment in, so you can not only see did they do the work right, also what time did they finish it, so as a relationship for time measurement. I know, I saw that spreadsheet at her talk and I almost left because I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I give up.
It's true.
I don't need these CEs anymore. I'm not a supervisor. It's impossible.
We should share. I really do think we should share. I've actually been working with the USF and St. Louis University, actually, to comprise different checklists and rubrics for items of practicum that is happening in 2022, right? So we've been talking and brainstorming, and I think that's really helpful because we're not islands, right? You know, like, we all have the same goal, make great behavior analysts.
Yeah. And it's very much the difference between, can any of us describe how to do an FA? Can we model how to do an FA? Can we observe someone doing an FA and say you did or did not do a good job? Yeah, of course we can. We've been doing this for many years. Can I document it in such a way that it is clear that they've met a set competency measure on that skill? Do I have set information on how they did better over time than the first? That's the piece that I think is very hard to not think of in the moment. Like, ooh, I should have had all that together. Ooh, whoops. Okay. I think they did a good job. I'll check the box. And you sort of, that's not enough anymore.
Yeah.
But how to get there, that's an area where I think we could definitely look for more collaboration.
I agree.
Because I'm sure somebody has like, oh, I have this great list. You could totally use it. And you check the boxes. It's real easy to use.
One thing that I was looking at on a Facebook post is talking about like free resources. You know how like other sciences and fields, or like they have like open source documents. That would be actually really cool for one of these. Like if you created a rubric for everything on the task list and then made it an open source document so that everyone could use it. I think because the BCBA is not going to create that because it's too, you know, it's going to be different for each site, right? So you probably couldn't modify it, but that would be really neat to just have as a template. So if anyone wants to do that, go for it.
Or honestly, if people have some of that, or they have colleagues, and you know, we're happy to help kind of try to middleman it and figure out how to put that together in a play. Well, we'll see what we can do, but you know, it'd be the kind of thing like if we wanted to sort of, as a group, lots of people collaborate. You know, please get in touch with us. At least we can point you in a direction, or
I would love to
try to help, because it'd be nice to have all of that set, because it's not a question of we don't know how to teach the skills or we don't know how to use behavior skills training. It's, do we have the required level of scaffolding and documentation? And that's the part I always feel like I've gotten really good at behavior skills training since the 8-hour supervision training became a requirement, since we read the supervisor's guidebook. But then when I read this, I'm like, ooh, I have to like make a whole class about this? Well, I don't have time for that. No, it's not happening. And I feel like that's the area I'm so behind in.
Yeah. And then the other piece they mention here too is, great if you have a list or a plan, but what if your student's not meeting those goals in the way that you would expect through behavior skills training? So there also needs to be some steps in place for remediation training, and what exactly would that look like too?
Yeah. And along the same line, one of the key points I thought in this little guideline was that you have to make it known to your participant that they're not going to get 100% the first time. Yeah. Like, it's okay if you fail. Like, if you don't get 100, like, don't freak out. And we've had some students in the past who are like, I've never gotten below a 99. And I'm like, it's life. You're going to get below a 99 in your life.
And this isn't, I mean, in the end, it's all about pass fail.
Right.
You know, you're eventually going to get it. If you don't, we're not signing your supervision form at the end.
Right.
You'll get it. It'll happen. I do like the idea too that having all these lists, you can then use that to assess where is your trainee, and then maybe start with the things that they can get 100% on right off the bat. Like, maybe they've been running discrete trial training for 2 years. They probably can complete those steps of the task list. And then you can start off your relationship with, wow, aren't you amazing? You're so great. I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much for showing me that. And, build that positive rapport right off the bat.
That's a good idea,
right?
Rob.
I mean, as opposed to like, ooh, you've never done FAs before? Well, that's what we're starting with.
Yeah, no,
I have a kid with severe behavior that I want you to meet.
Oh, I like that. I really like that.
Thank you. I think it's in the article. I don't think I made it up.
Oh,
they mentioned, I can't remember if it's in that section or another.
Oh, I was like,
did.
Whoa, Rob, did you just come up with that
I was a little more specific than they were in the article also. If Linda LeBlanc wants to send me a thank you email for that example and use it in another article, I'm not going to say no.
Sure. And I think it would be really helpful, too, if we had rubrics and checklists so we could then look across all of our supervisees and then slide into practice guideline number 3 where we're evaluating the effects of our supervision.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Slide on in.
Sliding on in with a slip and slide. So if we had that, we could look across supervisees and say, okay, well, where is everybody having trouble? So that's probably me. Mm-hmm. Then, right? Like, if everybody's having trouble in one thing, it could be a hard skill, but it also could be that I suck at training it.
Well, the most basic way, if you have your checklist, you have your really dynamic spreadsheet list of your trainees and what they're working on, you want to know if you had effective supervision. On September 1st, we did our very first preference assessment, and they scored 70% on my competency list. And then we did another one on October 1st, and they got 90%. Hey, great, your supervision's effective. Like, that's probably the most basic way to show it, but you've got some information, some data there to say this person is learning a skill, and as long as you've been meeting with them regularly, your supervision has to have been a part of it. If I didn't meet with them in September to October, ooh, what happened there? Maybe it wasn't you, and that's good information too. I think the two go hand. You're right, Jay. The two go hand in hand. If you don't know what you're trying to work on as part of your supervision, it's really hard to judge. Is my supervision effective?
Yeah,
because they're learning new skills, but if you're not planning for it. Did we ever talk about that? If you didn't, okay, well, then your supervision had nothing to do with the fact that they mastered another skill on the task list.
Right.
This is a good conversation, I think, to bring up. How exactly are we defining progress for our trainees? And they list several different ways, which I think is good to just break it down and think about it, because you're like, well, they just need to be BCBAs at the end of it all. What do you mean?
If that's the case, you can sign that form day one. Like, listen, I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to sign this for you, right? It's a formality. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
You're doing great. But they break it down saying, well, you could evaluate their progress according to how they do on the competencies. Like you just described, Rob, like they had a 70 and now they have a 90. But you could also look at the changes that they produce with precision of their behavior analytic language, which might be a little challenging, but you'd have to develop some type of scale.
Take a better supervisor than I to be able to say your fluency in these terminology.
But it could be define this for me, and do you meet the Cooper definition, or are you a few words away, or something along those lines. You could track their errors in data collection, which might tell you some information about it.
I'd rather track their successes in data collection.
Okay, fine. We'll flip that on its head. They said indirectly you could look at client progress, but I think many of us who have been in the field for a while know that is only going to function as an indirect measure, because there's so many variables present there that I would not want to evaluate my trainees' progress solely on client. That wouldn't be progress. Fair. Yeah, exactly.
That happened to me one time, actually, and it was very stressful.
Yeah.
It was real stressful because my student, was not doing really well, but they were doing really well according to themselves, right? Because they were making, slow, small steps of progress, but it just wasn't enough. I felt like I was letting everyone down. My trainee, my student, everyone, because we were only looking at that one indicator of success.
Yeah. And that's not fair to anyone. Right. And sometimes if you're, let's say a second year master's student who's now entering into practicum, you have more experience, you may be working with more challenging students, you're not going to see such easy gains in their progress either. So I think that is just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Everything about that measure. And then you can also look at the feedback that you get from the trainee, either indirectly or through more formal surveys. And that can be a measure of how effective your supervision is, because it's not of course, we want them to make progress on these knowledge-based and performance-based competencies, but it's also about the relationship that you're establishing with your trainee, and they would be the best ones to give you feedback on how they feel that that's going.
Yeah. And the article says that, when you're asking this informally, maybe every meeting, so how is this going for you? Do you like the way I'm giving you supervision? When they do give you feedback, you need to be open to that feedback and also accept it like you would want them to accept feedback, even if you didn't necessarily agree with it. So then they said...
Even if you didn't really mean it when you asked them. No, just kidding.
But, like, if they're giving you, like, I think you're giving me too much work, then you would want to, thank them for giving their feedback, praise them for providing feedback because you want to still keep that open, and then provide them support and guidance on that feedback.
Yeah.
So, and if you can make changes, you should as quickly as possible. But if you can't, like, obviously people have to do some amount of rating because it's what our field is, looking at science.
Yeah.
Then you would provide that type of support and guidance. Well, if you're having a hard time, maybe we can look at a calendar. Maybe we can put up some study buddies for you. So then, provide extra support in that area. So I liked that.
Yeah, good point too.
So we really should be offering a lot of opportunities for our trainees to provide feedback. And it may be the best if it could be anonymous. It might not always be possible, right? So if you only have one supervisee or two,
it could be anonymous, but you're probably going to figure it out.
Right. So because that's always, the best type of feedback so that people feel like they can say anything. And I really, really love that they've added incorporate ethics and professional development into supervision as guideline 4, because I think ethics can be a scary thing. It can be a really scary thing for new behavior analysts because you're unlikely to hit the kind of ethical dilemmas as a behavior therapist that you will as a behavior analyst, right?
Right.
As a behavior therapist, you say, let me talk to my behavior analyst, right? Or let's talk to her. And I love that's the answer that all of my first year students give. Like initially when we come into ethic, I'm like, here's a problem. What do you do? Like, ask our behavior analyst. I'm like, you are the behavior analyst. What do you do then? So I think having those ongoing conversations about those ethical scenarios, even if they're not real or pertinent to right now, but maybe possibly developing some or taking some. APBA has a really awesome ethics paragraph every newsletter, going over those.
We talked in the last episode, the technology excerpt, one of the areas of using the web-based program Menti, which is sort of everyone throws up ideas and it makes one of those word clouds.
Oh, fun.
Or Kahoot is another one where it's like a little game, it's like a little, not Jeopardy, but it's like a little quiz game.
Yeah.
Is you could do ethics, because I know one of the things I mentioned when I was talking with Jamie was the idea of whenever there's an ethics problem, I always feel like I'm going to give the wrong answer. Everyone's going to think I'm a bad person because I didn't think it through.
Right.
And if you were very new to it, I think it'd be nice to have like, which of these is the choice? Or like, put down what you think is the idea, in 2 words, or, which guideline on the task list would allow people, I think, to, especially if you're doing group supervision, to just put out the ideas without the fear of like, I'm going to get this wrong. Because ethics is, like you said, Jack, it's so complicated. It's not the same as like, can you define a response? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's you either can or you can't.
It's a online system that allows students to put in anonymous answers on their own computer, and then it graphs those data as group data on the big screen.
Yeah, and then you can have the discussion. So after everyone's put in what they think the answer is, you can talk about, okay, let's get into more depth about that. But that might be a fun way to just have an ethics, every supervision meeting we have an ethics challenge time. And especially if you have multiple people, it's a way to avoid, I think, what a lot of first year students do of like, I'd ask someone else, or I'm not really sure. Right. And then you end up as a supervisor just sort of lecturing to them about what you do, which isn't really the purpose.
Most helpful, yeah. And I mean, adding in a discussion of ethics promotes discussion of ethics, right? So if there is a potential ethics violation that you've done, you may not feel as scared to bring it up or be like, hey, I want to talk about this. This probably was an ethics violation. Like, how can I remedy this situation? And that really aligns with the ethical code 7.01, where we have to promote an ethical culture. So talking about it makes it okay to talk about it, and it's less taboo, I think, which is really great.
Yeah. Yeah, in addition to the APBA, what's that word?
It's a newsletter.
They also mentioned Bailey and Birch's book, which is 50 ethical scenarios for behavior analysts.
Yeah.
So that could be a useful tool too. You could just pop up one of those each time you meet and review it.
Yeah, the multiple exemplars is so important with ethics. And it's even mentioned in the article. It's one thing to go through, like, let's go through and make an example for each problem on the task list. Most of your students could probably get that after a few practices. But the issue is, you go to any conference on ethics, the first question they bring up, it's like, well, I could probably name 4 areas that could be impacted by our ethical guidelines, but are they? And even if they are, to what extent are they impacted? Therefore, I would change how I respond to it. There are a lot of pieces of information that are not as cut and dry as like, the example in real life is never that, like, this person's using cayenne pepper to punish the student when they are bad. Oh, don't do that. That's using punishment without reinforcement. Great job. You did it. You have all your ethics. It's never that simple.
It isn't. It is never that simple. And remember, even though we're not really talking about ethics right now, you can always email the BACB website if you have an ethical question, or there's the hotline on the ABAI website that all of your questions go directly to John Bailey.
I got to use that this last year. I had a great question. He got right back to me. It was I think I was able to go, thank you so much. I can't believe you're still answering. Oh.
Yeah, so those are always resources that we want to make sure that people know that are still out there.
Yeah. And then the professional development, I want to speak, I believe it was they mentioned the Carr and Briggs 2010 article on contacting, journal or staying involved in literature. That actually was that article, and a talk about that article was really the birthplace of sort of one of the nascent areas where I think the whole part of the ABA Inside Track
that is true
idea came from. That's where the journal club that I originally had started, and then...
We were first a journal club, everyone.
Yep.
A journal club that met at Panera, and nobody showed up.
No, we had a couple people.
No, we had a few people.
For a long time, I thought you were just going to journal, like
bullet journal.
Oh, because I originally did it in my workplace,
group.
And you talk about nobody showed up.
I was like, I had to stay late for journal club, like your journal.
You never once asked me, like, are you just sitting and writing in your journal? Today was the hard day. The fall leaves crisp in the air. No, but yes. If you are not, and I'm surprised this gets its own, well, I'm not surprised it gets its own section, but it sort of feels like a part and parcel of here's my breakdown of what I'm going to supervise, and here's how it works on the task list. Because you really should be looking at those articles, because if you don't know where any of this information came from, or you don't know where you would find updates to some of these basic skills, you're really not going to be very good at your job. Even if you are an amazing trainee, you're going to be really bad at your job within like 2 or 3 years when everyone sort of moved past what you know.
Oh, yeah. It's so true. That's a really good point, and I never thought about it. I'm going to bring that up to all of my students.
So if you're not telling your supervisees to listen to ABA Inside Track, well, you're not a very good supervisor. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it. I know we're all thinking it.
That's so funny. You also want to encourage your trainees to go to conferences when they can. Yep. There's always webinars that they can listen to. They can go to invited speakers and take it. Almost all places have some type of professional development. You should be doing that, taking advantage of it whenever you can.
Yeah, there are a lot of options out there now.
So you should just be doing
Almost every state seems to have their own conference, and some of them are very small, where you could actually, as a trainee, meet some of the luminaries in the field and say hi.
Be all dreamy,
There's a lot of webinar options.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can do live webinars. And Rob has mastered just email the author of this article.
It's amazing, because they almost always write back, and almost everyone is just very nice.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, nothing makes you feel like I can learn anything I need to about my field than feeling like I'm going to email someone who knows better than I do.
That's amazing.
Getting a response.
Actually, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love that about our field.
Me too.
Yeah,
that's
people
great.
Will write you back. That's so great.
Yeah.
Thanks, big names.
Thanks, big names. So that actually just helps us to skip, hop, and jump into the 5th practice guideline, where we should be continuing our relationship with our trainees post-certification. So that does not mean that you still need to meet with them on a weekly basis.
No.
Or a monthly basis even, but maybe it's going to depend on what they need, right? Mm-hmm. So I always encourage any of my trainees to ask themselves, who do you want to be your mentor? And then ask that person if they will be your mentor, right? Don't just assume that they're going to be your mentor and want to hang out with you all the time. And then that will strike the balance so that everybody, again, knows what the expectation is, right? So if I have a student that never ever emailed me and asked me to be their mentor, and they're just emailing me every day, like nonstop about different questions, I may be less likely to respond back to them. I'm like, why are they emailing me so much?
Yeah.
Why don't they have anyone else to talk to? But if I've been, if we've talked and said, hey, like, I would love to serve this mentorship role with you, then I would feel much more like, oh, I'm going to get back to you right away because that's my role. Like, we've set clear expectations. And that's just one way you can maintain a relationship post-certification.
This step goes back to the author's intent of being a supervisor is a very important, capital I, task. Just because your trainee has taken their exam, they've passed, they've done all the supervision, expectations on the task list, they graduated from their program, all that stuff, it doesn't mean they actually know exactly how to do their job. They know how to do components of their job, but they might not know how to do them given a change in exemplars that perhaps you weren't able to create during your supervision time, because you can only make so many opportunities to engage in certain skills on that task list. Some of them you're only going to be able to role play, and you can have a bunch of scenarios, but the first real one that your trainee meets is probably going to be something that you didn't even imagine at the time. So being able to continue supporting them, or even if you're not doing it on a monthly basis or regular basis, still making sure that you're check in occasionally, and that they should be able to check in with you so that you can still be a resource for them. Yeah. If you've done a good job teaching them other resources too, then great. You have opportunities for them to reach out to other people in the field, and it's good if you can have multiple supervisors during your supervisory period. Just to get a different opinion is always positive. One
thing that I love that they brought up is that you could actually set up a peer group, so it might not be you that they call all the time, because we're all pretty busy, right? Mm-hmm. So, and think about it, if we were doing this for 20 years and we have maybe 5 supervisees a year, that's a lot of supervisees, right? I know, but math, guys, math, right? Like, if they were emailing you on a weekly or monthly basis, or you had to meet with them on a monthly basis, that would seem pretty intense. But I love this peer group because then they're accessing people in their, where they're at in life. So peer groups, I think, are really cool and important. Yeah. It may be less intimidating, right? Mm-hmm. If you're asking someone that's at your level questions. Yeah. Yeah, I just love that.
That's a nice idea.
Yeah, what a great article.
And, if for those of you who only, haven't had a lot of supervisees, or maybe had one, but didn't continue the relationship, it is pretty awesome when you are talking to someone that you directly supervise and you see them tackling a problem, or you hear about a problem they faced and they did a great job, and they're specifically citing something that occurred during your supervision time, or doing it in a way that you're like, I modeled that. That's how I modeled it. It is almost like, if you have kids, it's sort of like when your kids do something. Like if you don't have kids, that's what it's going to be like when you have kids. Those positive times of, I taught them that. Oh, I'm so proud. There's a real pride to supervision, and you should take pride in your supervision. You should do a good job with it so that you can, raise good behavior analysts and then take pride in their future accomplishments. Yeah. All right. This article is great too. I know some people just kind of listen to us talk about the articles and might not have a copy of it. This is one to go get a hard copy of it. The link's on the website. It's in the show notes, because it has those great tables that lists out all these steps in bulleted lists and says, here are some resources and ideas. And in some cases, it's, hey, here's the citation you might want to look at for more examples. So, it's a great rabbit hole, great place to start looking.
I love it. I love that one, precisely for all the appendices and all the data sheets that they give you. Yeah, it's really great. You could print these all off and post them around your office, or, on your desk.
Frame them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so these are steps to take to be an awesome supervisor. But when we come back, we're going to share some steps to take when it all kind of goes to hell. Be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD-level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu. See you there!
And we are back talking about barriers to supervision. Now, before we get into our second article on detecting and addressing these barriers to successful supervision, I want to make sure that all of you who are out there listening for CEs are here for our first secret code word. Yes, that's right. ABA Inside Track is ACE approved. So by listening and going to our website, you can find a link in the show notes or go to abainsidetrack.com. You too can purchase CEs for listening to this episode, but you will need 2 secret code words to prove that you have listened intently to the show. And the first of those code words is cranberry, cranberry. We live up in New England where there are plenty of cranberry farms. We can go to a cranberry festival if we so desire.
It's a bog.
Well, the festival, it's a bog. It's only because they make it a bog because it makes it easier to harvest. You could grow the cranberries anywhere. You just have to pick them by hand.
I did not know that.
Yes, you flood the bog, and then the cranberries all kind of can get sucked out with like a big like half a rubber tire, sort of like yank them all in, and then suck them up and throw away all the leaves.
Oh,
it's a really
it was
cool
super
machine.
cool. We went to a festival last year.
Yeah, if you've never had a cranberry, like if you bought a cranberry, like Craisins or cranberries in the store, had Ocean Spray cranberry drink, it's like pretty good. If you've ever eaten just a plain cranberry, they are disgusting.
They are.
So if anyone ever asks you, hey, what did the Pilgrims eat at the first Thanksgiving? And someone says cranberry sauce, tell them you're lying. That is not something they would have eaten because it's gross and they didn't have enough sugar to make them palatable. Cranberry. You learn a lot here on ABA Inside Track, not just about behavior analysis.
But Super Mario Brothers and cranberries.
The Pilgrims. Yeah. So this second article is going to get directly into what happens. So, what happens when all of your great attempts at supervision have failed? Hopefully, and this will come back over and over again in the article on detecting and addressing barriers, hopefully it is not because you failed to complete any of the steps that we talked about from the previous article. And it has nothing to do with your ability to supervise. However, the first thing you're going to want to know is you might be responsible. So you have to actually be pretty critical of your own supervision ability. So there are a lot of problems that can actually develop in any sort of supervisory relationship. It could have to do with the relationship itself. It could have to do with you and the fact that you're a terrible person. It could have something to do with the fact that your trainee is having a hard time. No, but that is a legitimate problem that could happen.
It's true.
It's listed in here. You are very different than your... I mean, it basically boiled down to, I have a difference with my trainee, and I'm too much of a jerk to ever accept that difference to work with this person. That could happen. It could be bad supervision. It could be bad skills of the soup trainee. There are a lot of things that could happen. So it's really important that you always go into any issues that crop up with your supervision relationship with a systematic approach. Where is the source of the failure? You should really be thinking about, how can I as a supervisor try to resolve this problem? Is this something I need to do? Something my trainee needs to do? Something we both need to do? Because again, just like in life, there are plenty of reinforcers going around, and there are a lot of poor supervision choices that would probably be negatively reinforced by, say, ooh, this is hard. I'm just going to tell them to find a different supervisor and I can escape this. Or I can just sort of ignore the problem as long as possible and just sign off the form at the end of this relationship and just get this person out of my hair. But these are really terrible ways to approach your supervision relationship problems. For a lot of reasons, one of which being you've then trained a bad supervisor, or you yourself have never learned to be a good supervisor. So you're really failing at skill development. So, just like in the last article, we have Sellers, LeBlanc, and Valentino taking what is known in the research, their own practical ideas, and sort of putting together some ideas and answers to questions related to a couple key areas. And the issues addressed in the article are, what do you do when there's just a general problem in your supervisor relationship? What do you do when your trainee has persistent professionalism and interpersonal problems? What do you do if your trainee has poor time management skills or they are disorganized? What do you do if your trainee has poor interpersonal skills? And what do you do if your trainee has trouble with feedback or accepting feedback?
I feel like this is a nice parallel for a situation I've often encountered as a BCBA, where I may be working with a client and the client's parents say they don't like the particular behavior therapist who's working with their client. And I always backtrack when I'm in that situation and say we could have one of two, well, probably more than two, but one of a couple problems. The first problem is it a skill deficit on the part of the behavior therapist, right? And that is something that needs to be addressed first and foremost. If that's all taken care of and there are no remaining skill deficits as far as how one works with the child, then the next question to ask is there a challenge here with the style of how the person works with the child, right? And sometimes that's a fixable problem, and sometimes it's not exactly a fixable problem. Like one time I had a parent explain it to me as it's just like a bad date, right? Like it's just like it ain't jiving type thing.
And that happens, right? We're people.
It really does. It really does. And when you have that situation, if you can make other arrangements, I think it's best to do so.
I agree.
After you've taken into consideration all the other potential skill deficits that you need to remedy. So you could have something similar happening here, right? If you have bad mojo between the supervisor and the trainee, first try to figure out, are there skill deficits there? And then from there, is it a personality thing?
Mm-hmm.
But as a supervisor, if it's a personality thing, we as supervisors have the ethical responsibility to rise above that and try to find effective ways to supervise.
Right, because there still could be plenty of things you can do.
Right.
Once you've recognized that as a problem, there's still a lot of things you can do, which we're going to go into.
Yeah. I think we want to start with step one. How do you know if a problem is occurring?
Sounds good.
What signs could there be?
Sure.
Some of them are easy in terms of, hey, they're taking feedback poorly. Every time you give them the feedback, they cry or they yell back at you or they're getting very argumentative. Some of them are very clear, like, this seems weird. Some of them are a lot harder in terms of, say, like, interpersonal problems might be harder to recognize because you might not see them. You might get along great with your trainee. Other people might not. And then sort of the problems with your supervisor relationship, I think, would be the hardest ones. I know we all saw Dr. Alan Carcina, who was a former guest of the show, talk about supervision, and he sort of shared some anecdotes in which he had some great supervisory relationships and some where he really didn't know anything was wrong until the supervisee or the trainee just said, I'm not doing this anymore, sort of left.
Yeah, they're like, he's like, where'd you go? And they're like, I've quit.
Yeah. And it's one of those things of, and he was honest, like, were there signs that I totally was missing there? So, Jackie, you were mentioning some of your favorite signs, and Diana, you too. What are the signs that you would want to look for to say, my supervisor relationship is in danger?
The first thing I look for is if they stop showing up. Right? So if they stop showing up and like countless times, week after week, reschedule after reschedule, they're still rescheduling or they're just not showing up. Right? So that right there is like something's going on. Mm-hmm. Either they don't want to see me or they don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's something else going on. Mm-hmm. My second favorite one, I'm just going to give you my top 3.
Okay.
Is when people just stop talking in meetings. Mm-hmm. So they say nothing. And I'm like, how's it going? Haha, great. Then it's awkward. And I'm like,
we scheduled an hour
right?
here, so
like,
I really hope you start talking.
Time. So that, maybe in the beginning that's not a problem, right? I need to figure out ways to
they might
pull
be
information.
Nervous, getting to know you type thing.
Right,
yeah.
And then my third one, if I talk at the top 3, is when supervisees or trainees have yelled at me. Just
you yell back and say, how dare you? Do you know who I am?
Or yelled at me and been like, why don't you just sign my form? Like, I'm here. Why can't you just sign my form? Mm-hmm. And I don't love that.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
it's not fun to be
I think there's usually a problem there. What about you?
Yeah, I think the first 2 that you mentioned are common indicators of escape or avoidance.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that could take other forms as well, like not responding to emails, finding excuses as to why particular assignments haven't been completed.
Absolutely.
Right? Crying. So yeah, any of those might be an indicator that the situation's not going great. Trainees who are asking for help and assistance on very small tasks that they should be able to do themselves might be an indication that they are feeling overwhelmed.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You might need to kind of sit down and do what we called in college a DTR, define the relationship.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's so funny. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was very Furman specific.
Yeah, that's nice. I love that in this article they said that if you're unsure, like if you're not quite sure if something's going on, to jot everything down in your impressions of the meeting so that then over time you can go back and look and see like, oh yeah, this weird behavior, this unusual behavior, like they're not talking as much, they're showing up late, they're like rescheduling has gone on for like a few times. So they're not like, oh, I think it's happened 2 times.
Yeah.
When it's really happened like
Right.
7 times.
Right.
And when it comes to these problems, they could have developed for the same reasons that they would develop in any relationship. You know, the trainee has a history of negative reinforcement. Negatively reinforcement, they skip the meetings because they have a bad history with a supervisor who gave really aversive feedback. So they don't know you're going to give great, super awesome feedback because you listen to these episodes and you've practiced being a supervisor for a long time.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you have a person, it could be, you know, personality difference. You just, the things that they are interested in, you didn't set those expectations at the beginning so that they want to do something different than you want to do. You know, you want to get something different out of your relationship as supervisor trainee, maybe.
Yeah. What I actually thought you were going to say, Rob, is you could see changes in their performance unrelated to the relationship between the two of you as well. So that's something to keep in mind, too, that there could be, you know, multiple other types of stressors going on.
Yeah.
But it's still important that you figure that out
Right.
if they are willing to talk to you about that so that they can, you know,
So when you notice that there's a
develop
problem,
some problem-solving skills related to that.
you notice there's a problem in your supervisor relationship, there are a couple steps you want to take. The first one, I think, is going to be very mature of you as a supervisor. Is there something that you are doing wrong? Is it you? Is there something that you need to change? And, you know, Jackie, you mentioned a couple ways you could do that. You could be taking notes after every meeting. You could try to elicit feedback from the trainee. Hey, is there anything that's going on that's bothering you? And if they mention, oh, you know, I had a lot of deaths in the family recently and I'm really stressed out about something, and, you know, I broke up with my significant other. Okay, maybe it's just a temporary thing. But, you know, maybe they could be honest about like, well, I've been having a hard time. You'd be giving me a lot of assignments. I have a hard time getting them done. And you tend to yell at me when I, you know, don't do it. It could be simple. And then if you don't think it's you, okay, well, what could it be? Is it, like you said, Diana, a skills deficit? Or is it more to do, again, with your relationship? And if it's a skills deficit, you know, you kind of use the FBA framework. All right, what is the behavior of concern? When is the problem likely to happen and unlikely to happen? What might be reinforcing these challenges occurring? And then, okay, is there a barrier? If so, what do I do? And then it's almost always the same situation. Can you change that barrier? Can you reinforce successive approximations of the behavior you'd like to see? Is it a matter of you need to break down the skill and do more role play and practice and kind of redo your behavior skills training on whatever the skills deficit is? And honestly, if you're going to have a problem with your trainee, you kind of want to hope it's a skills deficit one, because those are probably the easiest ones to resolve, because there's a lot of literature on how to train people to engage in a skill appropriately. And you just take the time to find out what it is and then fix that skill. And you might find, oh, now they're doing their tasks more because they feel more comfortable. They're getting more praise. I spent more time giving praise on the things they're doing correctly. If you find out it's your fault, you need to fix it. And I don't think any of us as supervisors ever want to be in that situation, but it's going to happen to all of us where we are the problem. So you buy them flowers and chocolate and it's all fixed, right?
You say, I'm sorry. No, that never works.
No. I swear I'm going to change, trainee. Give me another chance.
You're down on your knees, holding on
trainee! I'm outside your window.
Oh, that'd be the creepiest.
Oh, God. Don't do any of those things.
Trainees, my current trainees, I know where you all live.
Here are the steps. You ready for those steps?
I was trying to cue you guys.
Yeah.
Step 1, sincere apology. I recognize this is my fault. I messed up.
Be sincere.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to know if you're not.
Yeah.
If you screwed up, just be like, I screwed up.
Yeah.
Right? Don't be
Being
like...
sincere is really one of the most important things you can do.
We'll all know.
And honestly, these are the steps for a good apology in life, too.
Right.
If you're going to apologize to someone, These steps will, whether it's a supervisor-trainee relationship, a personal relationship with your family, all of these this is how you do it. So, sincere apology.
Yep. Step 2, action plan. How you're going to fix it.
Well, you also, as part of your apology, you also want to make sure that you explain to the trainee what you did has impacted their ability to be supervised by you.
Yeah, that's step 3.
Yeah.
How?
Well, it's description of how behavior has impacted trainee and then how behavior has negatively impacted the relationship. So it's more like how has it personally affected them and then how it's affected your relationship, I guess.
Yeah.
Sort of how it's
okay. My bad. Maybe I got them out of order. Next, you're going to talk about what you as a supervisor should do instead. What you're going to do instead next.
Yeah. That's the action plan. That's the key.
Yeah. And then the last thing is follow up. I also think you should set a date to follow up.
I agree.
Right? So don't just say, and we'll check in on this later on.
No.
Because then
You'll
it's
forget.
just too easy to avoid going back to talk about it, or you forget, but maybe you're just avoiding it. So write down a date and stick to that date so that you can have a follow-up conversation.
Put it on your supervision agenda, your meeting agenda. We're going to talk about how that's been going.
Like, how am I doing? Yeah. And ask open-ended questions. So that's one thing that the authors recommend to make a more open relationship is ask these open-ended questions so that you're like, is your day going good? Yes or no? Right? So they can be like, yes. And then you're like, great. All right, let's move on. Right? So give
the formalities.
give the opportunity to give these open-ended questions. You'll find more about whatever's going on. So if the relationship is damaged in some way, you'll be able to find out more about why.
And they also mentioned, too, if you're not quite sure how to mend the relationship or what that action plan is, talk to one of your colleagues or talk to your own mentor about, have they been in a similar situation? And if so, what were their steps? They even mentioned maybe you could, role play with a mentor. It's okay. If you have to apologize, you want to do it right.
Yeah.
And if you need to ask for help, go for it.
And one thing you could do, too, is if I don't know what I need to do, I can say, like, hey, trainee, I screwed up. Here is why I think I screwed up. Here's all the things I did. What would make this better for you? And how can I be a better supervisor for you? So you could get help by asking them what they would want. So that's a nice way to do it, too.
And then...
Not that you're going to do everything they ask.
Absolutely,
right? If they say, I want you to give me less stuff to do. Well, that may or may not be available.
Right, yeah.
So it was a skills deficit. Was it something that you did? And then finally, as they call it, I think, the relationship conflict. That couple shouldn't be together. The mismatch. There's as they call it, I'm just going to quote the article, a mismatch between an essential characteristic, values, or worldview. So it's not, this relationship is just not going to work.
It's like the
I don't
bad date.
see a future in this relationship.
You try really hard. You do a lot of things. It's you, it's them, it's both of you.
Yep. And you certainly, you don't, and it's in the ethics guidelines, 105C they mention, is you don't want to let differences impede your ability to provide effective supervision. So you want to try to overcome what those differences are, and you can have a respectful conversation about that, being aware, of course, that as a supervisor, there's a real power differential there. So, even though you're trying to be open about the differences, it may not come off that way, so you just be careful about that. And is this about, being more culturally diverse in your own experiences? Is it about identifying your own preconceptions that could be a barrier to supervision? There's a self-evaluation tool from Hughes, Fong et al. That's cited here that goes into, how can you identify, whether this problem or whether this mismatch is something that you can get over? Is it an insurmountable problem? And if it is, and it could be, you may have to help them find a different supervisor.
Yeah. But that's important, too. You're not just going to say, we're done here. You are going to take the onus of finding them someone else who can.
Everything about you is terrible, and I can't stand it. So
You're
find somebody else.
No, it can't be like that, and you have to, I think you have to tread pretty carefully here, right? If you're the one who's saying, like, I don't think I can work with this other person, particularly if there's, like, cultural differences, like, that could be taken in very much the wrong way. So I think you have to be careful about this and, make sure that you've documented everything that you're doing to ensure that you have attempted to have the type of relationship with this person that you wanted to.
Yeah, well, this article even lays out, if you're going to have that conversation, you mentioned it's a strain that isn't anybody's fault. You identify positive aspects of the trainee and that you really want what's best for them, and it just isn't this relationship. this supervisor related. It really did feel like when I was reading this, I was like, this is like the saddest breakup. It's like someone wrote a play about our sad relationship as supervisor and trainee. All right. So moving on, what do you do if there are problems with your trainee in terms of their professionalism or their interpersonal problems? And this one is a little bit more about the skills deficit. And there's certainly a checklist they mentioned, the performance diagnostic checklist, human services, PDCHS, that you could sort of use. And that'll help you identify what are the barriers that my trainee is having. And then how can I help them? And again, is it related to training? Was I not clear about the tasks I'm setting forward? Is it too much effort for my trainee?
And that checklist is available for free in the Behavior Analysis and Practice in an earlier edition. So you wouldn't have to like go out and buy something. It's an actual free article.
Yeah. So they list like 3 main areas that you could see potential challenges or skill deficits here. The first one is disorganization and poor time management on the part of the trainee, or I guess yourself, but that we kind of covered that earlier.
Yeah.
Difficulties in interpersonal skills, and then difficulties in accepting and applying feedback, right? So any one of those or multiple of those could be challenges for the trainee, which again, like you said, Rob, these are skill deficits. So assuming that your trainee is willing to work on those skills,
Right.
this should be a surmountable
Yes.
problem, right? So underneath disorganization and poor time management, you could first try to determine, is this a global problem?
Are they always a mess or just in certain areas?
No, that's true though, right?
Yeah.
Like there are places in my life where I'm always a mess. And
Just
I
a few?
Oh. And that is why I bought datadesigner.com.
That's right. Yep.
I bought a really expensive planner and it's actually helped. And it like outlines like my life goals and my exercise goals and my academic goals and my hour by hour. Now, if I only use it, I'm just kidding. I'm using it.
Where did I put that thing anyway?
Right? It's so big. It's really big. It's very big.
It is.
You tie it around your neck,
a
an albatross. You got to do it.
Yeah. But that is the question, right? So is this across the board, this person is disorganized, or is it only related specifically to the supervision time?
They need to work on fluency related to a specific skill to help them get better at engaging in that skill. They need help set prioritizing, or do they need you to sort of give them general life lessons on like, what are the things you need to work on in a day? And
get up
where
on
are you going to put your
time.
reminder, app on your phone? Yeah.
Go to bed.
Yeah. But sometimes that's where you need to start.
Yeah.
You know, and often trainees are young. They may not have a lot of life experience outside of college. And this is, they need some help organization. And that's okay.
Yeah, I love making myself a time management chart. I got bubbles, I got spreadsheets, I got colors. I'm like, now red is when you go to work, purple is when you do your homework.
Oh, I tried to do some color coding on my calendar that way, and it was too much of a pain in the ass.
Yellow is when you're gonna watch The Bachelor, Bachelorette, Bachelor in Paradise.
And this might be one
Rob,
of the reasons.
what if your handwriting is so bad you can't read what your own notes were?
I mean, that's why I use a computer and type everything.
Really?
I type a lot of things. I mean, I take notes if I'm planning to just put them somewhere else later, with my handwriting. But in any case, one of the reasons I think you want to be clear about expectations in your contract or setting expectations when you're building your relationship are so that if a situation like this arises, your trainee doesn't feel like, don't tell me how to live my life. It's like, no, because it says in here that we were going to set timelines that you agreed to meet. So either I can help you develop better skills in this area, or you're kind of breaking the contract. We have to work on this.
That's how you get them.
That's how you get. Yeah, that's right. It's in the contract. I'm sorry. No, but it's important. I mean,
then you do this.
Do you want to? I mean, do we want to train BCBAs who are like, oh yeah, I'll get that done later. Oh, whoopity doo, I didn't finish that. Sorry, parents, I didn't get that plan done. Don't worry, I'll get it later. No, you're responsible for that.
There are very real deadlines when you're a BCBA. That again, if you're not,
there are legal deadlines
preparing
in some cases.
Your trainees to meet those deadlines by continuing to extend their deadlines when they're in supervision with you, then you're not doing them any favors.
Nope. What about if they have problems with their interpersonal skills?
Well, this could really break down in a lot of different ways. So there might be several different types of skills that you would want to identify for your trainee and then work with them towards competency. And those could include things like active listening.
What?
Yeah. Nice. I learned how to do active listening when I did crisis line in college.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You need to be actively listening, so they're like, you're not listening to me!
Yeah.
Right? Crisis.
That's right. I hear you're feeling frustrated. That's active listening.
Mm-hmm.
In case you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Engaging in effective writing. That's a huge skill. So that one you might want to check on early and start working on.
Work on early, work on always. I'm always still working on my writing too, so I am the first to admit that I am not a great writer. And I have gotten okay at it over the past couple of years, but I still frequently am. I'm going to turn anything in. I'm like, hey, Diana, can you read this and make sure that it actually makes sense? And I'm not like jumping ship every paragraph. So, I mean, knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know is also really helpful as a supervisee and a supervisor, right?
I love proofreading.
I know you do.
Gets me so excited. Next up, effective speaking and monitoring your non-vocal language.
Which can be so hard.
Yeah.
You know, resting face.
Yeah. Yep.
Resting face is a common thing that happens to people, and people do not love it.
Yeah.
What's your resting face? Like
resting bee face.
Oh.
I just didn't want to swear online.
Gotcha.
Yeah. People don't love that. Because then it just comes off as like you don't want to be there, you're disinterested, you don't like their kid, they don't like you, like you know, like there's a whole mess when people have resting bee face.
Yeah, and they don't even realize
that it's happening
a lot of the time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so being the person who gives that feedback can be extremely helpful to the trainee, because maybe no one's ever said that before, right? And you don't want to say it either. Because it's no fun.
The worst face I've ever seen.
I actually had this. I've had this feedback.
I've had this feedback too.
Not resting bee face, but my face is usually too animated during troubling times, and they're like, "You're actually inadvertently reinforcing that behavior." Because I'd be like, "I'm showing right now like clown face, really." And so I had to practice in the mirror a bunch. Neutral face.
Yeah.
Neutral face is really hard for me.
When I'm just neutral, I just try to turn up the corners of my mouth a little bit.
Let me see. Oh, that's good.
Just a tiny bit. Not like creepy way. Not like
dead eyes.
Like a Chucky face.
Yeah. No,
but
it's
just
true.
like...
Those were good special effects. He had a pretty animated face.
He really did.
Maybe I don't mean Chucky. I mean the ventriloquist doll.
Oh. Well, Chucky was kind of a ventriloquist
no, he was a my buddy kind of doll.
My buddy.
But it was off-brand. It was off-brand.
Off-brand, my buddy.
Yeah, they didn't use the My Buddy doll.
I added in a quote from the article too when we're talking about non-vocal cues, which is, quote, lack of discrimination of subtle contextual cues, end quote. So I just thought that was a nice description of some of the challenges you could potentially face if your trainee is having difficulty with interpersonal skills, and a good behavioral way to think about what those challenges are. Because sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you're like, they just don't get it. They're just not getting it, right? So they're just not discriminating the proper contextual cues in those scenarios. And that might be a helpful way to think about what you can point them toward in order to help increase those skills.
I like the idea of some trainees possibly having issues with interpersonal skills related to anxiety. So your trainees might just have a really hard time dealing with other people. And they get stressed out and their face gets red, or they start muttering more, or they or they zone out because they have a long history with, if I zone out, maybe they'll stop talking to me and the situation will go away. So it's not a matter of they don't know what to do. Well, it is a matter of they don't know what to do, or they don't feel comfortable to do it, and how you may need to actually do some almost anxiety reduction tasks of like paying attention to your body when you're feeling that way and breathing, and here are some alternate behaviors you can or responses you can engage in to sort of feel less anxiety, and here's what you should do when you feel that way, and you might actually need to treat it like an anxiety reduction plan.
Yeah. I mean, I am a complete introvert, and I spend most of the conversations that I engage in plotting my escape from those conversations. So,
which is hilarious because I'm the exact opposite, and I'm plotting how are the ways that I can keep people in this conversation, even if they so do not want to be in it
anymore. Even if they try to leave.
I read an article recently that was, if people change topic on you 3 times, that's a signal of, anyway, it was great talking to you.
And then I'm like, oh my God, I love that topic. I did that at a party actually this weekend. I went to someone's 40th birthday party, and 2 people really wanted to get out of a conversation, but I was just enjoying their company so much that I was just like, I'm just going to hold out as long as possible. And then it got so awkward that I was like, okay, I'll go get some cheese.
Like, it hurts me, though.
Yeah.
I think I'm fairly empathetic, and I can usually identify others who are also trying to escape a conversation as well. So if I'm in a supervisor relationship with them, I'd like to address it up front and say, look, you and I are both introverts, but we got to make it work in this world. So let's talk about the types of things that we both need to work on. And I also usually, when I'm having that conversation, talk to them about receiving feedback and how it can be perhaps more challenging if you're a person like us, right? Like, it's hard for me to give feedback. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get feedback sometimes. And just, be upfront with them. Like, this is a challenge for me. So give me feedback, too, on how I'm doing giving you feedback.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that can help.
Yeah.
I think so, too.
All right. So let's move on to kind of the last problem that might occur in terms of your barrier. So that's difficulty with feedback. And this is a pretty common issue.
I segged right into it.
This one's actually, yeah, you did. It's this is a little bit more straightforward in terms of how people accept feedback. Number one is hopefully you set an expectation that, hey, I'm going to be giving you feedback, and maybe even having a conversation about what kinds of feedback your trainee likes, because all the research on how to give feedback, and this is actually a researched area, it's really not clear. I think some research points to the feedback sandwich being not the greatest, but it's okay. Some points to you want to have like a ratio of 5 to
the critical feedback first.
So some say that. Some have said you want to say 5 positive to one critical thing. And it varies. There's not like it's like a lot of the research I think we talk about where it's not like, and the answer was do this one all the time.
Oh, fine.
There are ones that I think are a little bit more likely. So if you
my list?
If you had to pick one, you might be better off using this type or that type. DeGeneres Reed had "Should you order the feedback sandwich?" was the title of the article that went into that. But it's not as clear cut as this is the one way to give feedback. So it's okay to sort of take some lead from your trainee about how they might like to have feedback. You have to understand, is this my trainee had the worst day ever and they just really were crappy about taking feedback today? Or, man, they always seem to be getting pissed off when I give them feedback. There's certainly again, another checklist you could use, the corrective feedback instruments revised to get information about, types of feedback. You want to have discussed those expectations. But, you could also practice giving feedback at times when your supervisee is more likely to be successful. So it's all positive. So it's more positive feedback. They get used to the idea of taking feedback from you. Explaining the purpose of feedback is always good. I'm not doing this to be a jerk. If you are, stop. Don't give feedback to be a jerk. That's a you problem. That's not your trainee problem. That's a YP, not an MP. Is your feedback good? Might be another question to ask yourself. Is it high quality? Is it prescriptive enough so that there's something that your supervisee can do with it? And then also, can you present it in a way that is more supportive of, here's what we need to do. I know you can do it. I'm telling you this because I care about you and I think you're very skilled and can fix this. And then come back around and, hey, remember, great job today taking that feedback. I saw you doing this and you were using the feedback, because the other part of taking feedback is then actually implementing the feedback. So that might be another strategy kind of thrown out there of like checking in and making sure that they're using the feedback and then praising them if they are. And then finally, what do you do if all of these problems are occurring or one of these is occurring and you followed all these steps in the article and you've made sure it wasn't your problem, you've tried to address skills deficits, you've tried to sort of shape up and model the behavior you'd like to see, but nothing seems to be changing and your trainee is still kind of being a dud?
Go back to step 1. Try again.
Not necessarily. One of the reasons you have a contract is
rinse, repeat.
Have you reached a point in the contract where you've reached a point of termination of the professional relationship, and that is your last resort? I was afraid that was going to be the answer. Yeah, much like a lot of situations, if you're going to terminate, that is a last resort. So you really need to know that I did everything I possibly could. You probably want to make sure you're writing down exactly why it is you're terminating the contract, what you did to avoid needing to terminate the contract, and then share that with your trainee, which is very uncomfortable. I think you'd probably be better off, and many of us would rather I'm going to just try teaching them how to take feedback again rather than have that meeting. But this is, you're a terrible person, and here's why we can't continue this relationship.
Oh, Rob.
No, you wouldn't speak that way, but you would want to be supportive but clear as to why you cannot continue as their supervisor. and make sure they can ask you questions. And I'm sure one of the questions is, why don't you want to work with me anymore? It's uncomfortable.
Why don't you want to work with
What did I do? I'm going to try better, I swear. Supervisor! Well, those are the barriers as laid out in this article and some suggestions for responding to those barriers. So we went a little bit long, and I think these articles do a fabulous job, and I hope we did a fabulous job disseminating their key points. But just as a reminder, why don't we take a second and sort of go over sort of the list real quick. So what are the recommended practices for individual supervision? Because we don't have time for a full dissemination station because we're going really, really long. But let's just lay them out as a quick summary. So what are your 5 recommended practice guidelines?
Establish an effective supervisor-supervisee relationship. Establish a structured approach with specific content and competencies. Evaluate the effects of your own supervision. Incorporate ethics and professional development into your supervision. And continue with the relationship post-certification.
All right. And then, Diana, you want to take what are some possible barriers that might come up when you are engaging in supervision?
There could be problems in the supervisory relationship, which could be related to skill deficits on either the supervisor or the trainee side. There could be an overall relationship conflict, which may be insurmountable. Or there may be persistent professionalism and interpersonal problems for the trainee, which are skills that need to be taught and should be considered to be within the realm of the things that a supervisor might work on.
Mm-hmm. So those are really some great tips for starting your relationship to avoid problems and then dealing with problems should they occur. Whew! That's a lot of good supervision right there.
That's good stuff.
Good stuff. The sellers, LeBlanc and Valentino, really know their stuff. After all those years together of working on supervision. 27, I think it was. It's a long time. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. I want to make sure that if you are listening for CEs that you know our second secret code word, which is UGGS. UGGS. It's like the boot, right? It's those lambskin boots.
Yeah.
Make sure to wear socks with your Uggs. If you do not, your feet will sweat and you will get bacteria on your feet. For the love of God, please wear socks with your Uggs.
That's awesome. And your Uggs get really stinky.
Yeah. That's why you want to wear your socks. Because your feet sweat in them and then they get gross bacteria growing in them. I know Tom Brady likes his Uggs.
It's fall, y'all.
Well, that brings us to the end of our second part of our Supervision September episodes. We want to thank you all so very, very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have not, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher.
Or if you have,
just give us another review. No, get a new username. Give us a second review. But reviews and feedback are great. You can also certainly check us out on our website, abainsidetrack.com. We're on social media as ABA Inside Track. Or you can email us with thoughts, ideas for future episodes at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. And remember, Supervision September, we are an ACE approved podcast, so you can get your Supervision CEs from us. If you'd like to, though, please listen to all 3. We will be offering, like we did last year, a bundle for all 3 Supervision episodes to get all 3 of your Supervision CEs together. So, hey, we hope you're enjoying these episodes and you like the first part and the second part, and come back for the third part next week. That's right. No breaks in our episodes. Woohoo! I want to say thank you so much to Jackie and Diana for all their hard work.
You too, Rob.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. We will be back next week with another full-length episode about supervision. But until then, keep responding. Bye!